Congress passes Trump's mega bill and also a rescissions package that cuts $9 billion of prior spending. But fiscal conservatives remain frustrated that the party is not doing more to rein in massive government outlays.
From the opinion pages of the Wall Street Journal, this is All Things with Kim Strassel.
Welcome to All Things with Kim Strassel, and joining me this week is one of the GOP senators who has been pushing for deeper spending restraint, Florida Senator Rick Scott. Senator, thank you so much for joining us this week.
It's nice to be with you.
So I really want to dive into the spending problem in DC as something that's on a lot of Americans' mind. And I guess I'll just start with this big question. We just passed the One Big Beautiful Bill, which has some really good things in it and even had some spending cuts, although in my mind, we utterly whiffed in some ways on the opportunity to use it to lock in, for instance, DOGE cuts and to really tackle entitlement problems, to go after some of that bad Biden spending. Similarly, Congress just passed a rescissions package, and congratulations, because it's the first one Congress has passed in more than 30 years. Although at the same time, it was for a mere $9 billion when we are $37 trillion in debt. So my question is, why won't Republicans enact the small government agenda they campaign on all the time?
It's hard. Well, first off, there were some great things in the big beautiful bill. I mean, the extending the Trump tax cuts from his first term was a big deal. The border money was important. The military money was important. So, and there were some campaign promises that Trump made: no tax on tips, no tax on overtime. Reducing taxes for our seniors. So there's some good things in there. And the rescission, as you know, is a start. I mean, it's hard up here. So I think it's a big deal. We've got to get spending under control. I think we've had something like a 53% increase since pandemic in our spending, and I think population is up like 2%. So we've got a problem. And my belief is, if we don't solve the problem, what we're going to see is higher interest rates, not lower. We're not going to see a reduction in inflation. So we don't have a choice, but we're going to have to do this at some point. And I don't know when that day of reckoning is, but it's happening. I was governor of Florida. I'm a business guy. Ran for governor. I ran on package to get our state back to work. And Florida, it surprises people. Florida hadn't lived within their means in 20 straight years, and only once in 40 years. They were just borrowing money like crazy. Florida was going to go into default on its school debt when I got elected. So I balanced the budget. I actually paid off a third of state debt. We could do the same thing up here, but it's going to it's work. You've got to go through every line and say, that's a nice to have. But we're not going to borrow money to do that. And we're borrowing money to do everything right now. So it's going to happen. The public is going to demand it because they're going to get fed up. When you look at mortgages are barely under 7%. You look at inflation, it's come down, but logically, if interest rates don't go away, come down, inflation's not going to go away. The public's going to demand it.
Let me ask you, just to drill into this just a little more, because I think it's a question that a lot of Americans have. I know it's one I have, even though I get the privilege of speaking to many of you all the time. But when you're in Washington and you're talking to your colleagues in moments of candor, is it that they don't get it? They don't understand? I mean, do they really not realize at this point that our interest payments are now about equal to, if not more than, what we pay for our military budget every year? Is it just that they want to become Chase, just not now? What is it that they say? Do you think they have a grasp on this problem?
Well, you have to remember, we've got 100 senators up here, and they all come from different backgrounds. I'm probably the only person up here that's actually balanced a state budget by reducing spending. I'm probably the only person up here that's ever cut a third of the state debt, paid off a third of the state debt. So it's just not, if you look at it, if you're not been in business and it's never really been a problem, then you focus on things. In politics, it seems like people focus on things after they become a problem. I've tried to get ahead of problems. If you have success in business, you get ahead of your problems. You don't wait until they happen, right? So I just think it's a situation where, we have a lot of people up here that, have never been in business, good people. So they've never had to balance a budget. It's not as interesting. Like, I love reading economic reports. I read all this stuff. I look at the Wall Street Journal from the standpoint of what do I think is, where are we heading? So we can, if it's a bad thing, we hit it off at the pass. But a lot of people, they come up here with different backgrounds and different reasons. Nothing bad. It's just everybody's got a different background up here.
One thing you just mentioned, because I was very excited about it. You just were talking about the need to go through the budget line by line. And I know that was an idea floated by you, Senator Ron Johnson, Senator Mike Lee. It was something that you were hoping to have happen before the One Big Beautiful Bill went through, as a kind of precursor to it. I know that you guys even had some discussions with the White House about setting up that kind of a commission or a process. It didn't get formalized in the One Big Beautiful Bill, but did you get any assurances? Where does that idea or process stand?
Well, first of all, if you're a business guy, I ran a business with almost 300,000 employees. We had over probably 1,000 operating units. You had to go through a budget. You had to live within your budgets, and you held people accountable. So otherwise you go bankrupt. When I became governor of Florida, there's 4,000 lines in the budget in Florida. I went through every line of the budget every year. We had a written purpose for every line of the budget. If you didn't hit your purpose, I vetoed your money the next year. And I never got override by my legislature because I could explain it. So up here, it's really hard to get a real good line in the budget because we don't pass budgets; we pass spending bills. We are going to have a process and go through line by line through the budget. It's going to take time. What Ron Johnson, Mike Lee, Cynthia Lummis, in particular, and I have a goal to do is let's go through every line. Let's acknowledge there's a lot of things that we'd like to have, but guess what? We've got to live within our means. Think about it, Kim. The federal taxpayers told us what they want to give us. They want to give us about $5.5 trillion. Right. If you go out there and say, "Oh, I'm going to raise everybody's taxes," you think you're going to get reelected? No, you're not. So Republican or Democrat. So they've told us what they're going to give us. It's our job to live within that number. That number is about $5.5 trillion.
You mentioned something else. You said this was a start. And that was certainly, I think, the argument by those that wanted to see this bill go through quickly, the One Big Beautiful Bill, the argument that it was very important and something I agree with, that we needed tax certainty as soon as we could get it, that it was simply important to take that dagger off from over the heads of the American people, thinking there might be a huge tax increase, the border money important, the military money important. So just get it done. And by the way, remember that we will have another shot at this reconciliation apple when the new fiscal year begins later this year. And maybe we'll do more cutting then. Is that something you envision? Can that actually happen? Or do we end up with another bill that adds spending?
Well, it'll take, if every reconciliation package takes 50 Republican votes, because no Ds are going to vote for it, right? Then if we can't get 51, we get JD to break the tie. It's hard. We actually can do another reconciliation, but now, and then we can do one next year. But the hard thing is you got to have something that's pressure to get it done, right? And so what we try to figure out is, what would that pressure point be? So look, I'm the eternal optimist. My job is to give information to my colleagues. I get to run the Wednesday lunch. I run the group called Steering, which is the fiscal conservatives here. So as an example, I bring in speakers to explain, what do they think is going to happen to interest rates going forward? How will that impact our ability to sell treasuries? Just bring in people to explain. Like, we brought in people to explain, this is where there's abuse in the system in Medicaid, where the blue states have basically taken advantage of the federal taxpayer to give free health care to illegals. That's generally not, in most states, what people would vote for. So my goal is, give people good information. I think over time, they'll make great decisions.
One thing that possibly could move a bill forward, and I'd love to just get your thoughts on this, and you don't have to view it as a criticism of the president. Rather, we are just two Washington people offering observations. My history of Washington has always been that very little, if anything, ever gets done unless a president makes an absolute priority out of it, where they are setting deadlines, setting very clear goals, pushing people every day to do it. Is that something, if you were to have a reconciliation bill that was a little bit more focused on cutting government spending, shouldn't maybe, I have never seen Donald Trump make a priority out of this. Is that something that would be helpful? And is what in fact is going to be necessary if we actually want to get something like this underway?
I think it's going to take presidential leadership. I've talked to the president a lot about the budget, and a lot about balancing the budget, and a lot about making sure, like, take the Medicaid program, we take care of the people that was intended for, and we stop the abuse. So the president has committed to me that he is going to do everything he can to balance the budget. He wants to balance the budget. He wants to make sure that we don't waste money. So it's but the other side is, I mean, the guy, you look at what this. I mean, he's like, Trump's like the Energizer Bunny. He's got going every second, and you got Biden left him with a bad economy, left him with the bad issues all over the world. So he's got a lot on his plate. So, but I'm optimist. I believe the president is going to help get us to a balanced budget, because he knows it's important. He knows that it's going to be hard to get interest rates down and get inflation under control if we don't balance the budget.
The one big beautiful bill and reconciliation bills, that's one way you can get across some spending reform. And it's obviously a tool that Republicans have turned to, in part because, as you note, you only need 51 votes to get a reconciliation bill through. Right. Obviously, another interesting way to do this is a rescissions bill, like you guys just passed. And for listeners who don't know this, you will know this, Senator, but rescissions bills have become rare. The very last time we actually had a successful rescissions bill was in Bill Clinton's tenure. And then we had a series of presidents that didn't even offer any. That included George W. Bush throughout his entire 8 years, Barack Obama, Joe Biden, not a penny worth of rescissions offered. I love the idea of this, because it seems sensible to me that you take a look at money that's already in theory gone out the door and said, well, actually, we don't really need that after all. And you have a second shot at making smart decisions. This one barely made it through. Some Republicans balked at it. And moreover, this was a bill, I would say this rescissions package was one that was very low hanging fruit, like with issues that 99.9% of Republicans can back. So the White House is suggesting they might send another one or a couple more to you guys. How do you think those will land?
I think they're going to be well received. Here's what I learned. It's a totally different job to run a big company than it is to be the governor or be a U.S. senator. Which the thing you learn in politics is you got to go explain it. You got to take the time to make sure people understand what you're trying to do. And I think if we get a rescissions package from the White House, and they take the time to educate not only everybody in Congress, but the American public why they're doing it, I think I think Katie barred the door. I think there's a lot of opportunities. What we saw with Doge is that there's a lot of things that are just completely wasted. It's just a complete waste, and nobody knows. Kim, the difference between this and the Florida budget. The Florida budget was very prescriptive. Up here, there's a lot of money that's directed towards these agencies, and they have a lot of leeway how they spend it, and so they spend it the wrong way a lot. So we need to stop allowing them to do that, and we need to be very specific on where the money goes.
Yeah, but that actually involves Congress sitting down and writing prescriptive things, something that it's not been very good at.
Yeah, budget
lately. Yeah, no, I'm all there right with you. I would love to see Congress being extremely prescriptive in its legislation, because it's been obviously the cause of all sorts of problems, including bureaucratic excesses that go way beyond just spending. Obviously, one last area, since we're diving into potential possibilities for maybe doing something to right size our federal fisc. You guys have just really turned your attention to this year's appropriations process a bit late, since we're coming up on the deadline here of September 1st, not too long ago. House Republicans are looking like they might try to do some more aggressive cutting than they have done in the past as part of those appropriations bills, but they are in a more envious position than you are in the Senate, where you need 60 votes to pass your appropriations bills. How do you think the Senate is going to play this? Are Republicans going to attempt to do some real cuts and dare Democrats to block them and provoke a shutdown? Or does the Senate do what the Senate often does, is grease the usual Senate wheels with a lot of Senate money?
Well, they've greased the Senate with a bunch of not Senate money, it's your money, right?
Exactly.
So I'm hopeful that we'll actually pass the appropriations bills and pass budgets. This week, we're starting to see if we can do a portion of the budget. I think we've got to figure out how to do everything we can to follow the Trump budget. He has a path to balance a budget in a 3 or 4 year period of time. While I wouldn't want to do it in 1 year, I think we ought to I did a lot of turnarounds in businesses, and if you want to be successful with that, you basically balance your budget in 1 day, right? But I'm optimistic that we can get some of this done. If not, here's what happens. We'll get to September 30. Either we pass a continuing resolution to make a decision later, or we're going to get a big spending bill, or government shuts down. So what happens on the big spending bill? It's just 4 people come into a room and say, "Oh, we're going to put up. You guys, if you don't vote for it, government gets shut down, and we're going to blame you." So it's a horrible way to run your country. And it's what's taken us to this $37 trillion worth of debt. So I'm optimist. We'll get some spending reform done. We'll pass a real budget, but we don't have a lot of time left to do it.
What do you think your chances are of a shutdown?
I can't, it takes 7 Democrats to vote with us. I don't know one Democrat that wants to vote with us. So maybe they will. But if their requirement is to go, waste a whole bunch of money and increase the deficit, then I think you lose Republican votes. So I think it's going to be very difficult not to have a government shutdown. I don't want a government shutdown. I know the president doesn't want a government shutdown, but we've got to have some fiscal sanity here, because the American public cannot stand higher and higher interest rates and higher inflation.
Another question, although this is going to delve into your views on separations of powers, legal things. Do you think the president of the United States has an impoundment power, meaning the power to simply say, "I'm not spending money that Congress has said I have to spend"?
Well, the president, clearly does. Russ Vought clearly does. It's going through the court system, so the courts will make a decision whether he does or not. For my Senate, if the president has impoundment powers, I'm happy with that, because right now it seems like the only way we're going to start reducing spending is if the president has the power to stop doing it. One of the reasons why I was able to do it in Florida is because I had a line item veto.
What else is coming up in the next couple of weeks before you guys get out of there in the Senate that you think people should be keeping their eyes on?
Jay Powell. So it's going to be interesting to watch what the Federal Reserve does. I mean, they've got a lot of problems. $2.5 billion, which is more than it cost for a refurbishment of a building, which is more than it costs for a football stadium. He built this balance sheet that is now worth about $1 trillion less than the liabilities. He's losing money for the first time, I think, in the history of the Federal Reserve. And so he's got a lot of problems. And then I think, the 30th, as the next day, they get together to decide whether they're going to start reducing short-term rates. Remember, the issue is the Federal Reserve can have an impact on short-term rates. It's very difficult for them to have an impact on long-term rates. It's going to take, you and me and everybody else saying we want to buy treasuries when you see that the country is running $2 trillion deficits and have $37 trillion worth of debt. So this is going to be an interesting time to see what Jay Powell and the Federal Reserve does, and who gets appointed by next spring by the White House, and how they deal with this debt.
Yeah, we've got a lot of problems we have to dig out of. Senator, thank you so much for taking the time to come be with us this week. We are going to be hopeful like you and optimists like you that we see some progress on the spending front. We also want to thank our listeners for joining us. If you like the show, you can hit the subscribe button. And if you'd like to write to us, you can at atkim@wsj.com.